Hello, today is April 24th, 2022. My name is Matthew Colecio. I am interviewing Rosalie Colecio for the South Texas Archives at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. This is part of the Voces of a Pandemic Oral History Project in partnership with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. Please know, Mrs. Colecio, that this is a recorded interview will be placed in the South Texas Archives at Texas A&M University, Kingsville, and shared with the Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin. If there is anything you do not wish to answer or talk about, especially given that your recording may appear online, I will honor your wishes. Also, if there is something you want to talk about, please bring it up and we will talk about it. Because we are not conducting this interview in person, I need to record you consenting. So I'll ask you a series of 6 questions. Please say, yes, I agree, or no, I do not agree after each one. There are 4 questions we need to make sure you agree to before we go on. South Texas Archives at Texas University, Kingsville wishes to archive your interview along with any other photographs and other documentation at the South Texas Archives at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. We will retain copyright of the interview and other materials you donate to the South Texas Archives at Texas University, Kingsville. The first question, do you give us consent to archive your interview and your materials at Jernigan Library at Texas A&M University, Kingsville?
Yes, I consent.
Do you grant South Texas Archives at Jernigan Library at Texas A&M University, Kingsville copyright over the interview and any other material you provide?
Yes, I consent.
Do you agree to allow South Texas Archives at the Jernigan Library at Texas A&M University, Kingsville to post this interview on the internet where it may be viewed by people around the world?
Yes, I consent.
And the last question, do you grant South Texas Archives at the Jernigan Library at Texas A&M University, Kingsville consent to share your interview and your materials with Voces Oral History Center at the University of Texas at Austin for inclusion in the Voices of a Pandemic Oral History Project, which will include posting this interview on the internet?
Yes, I consent.
We have many questions in a pre-interview form that we have already filled out. We use that information from the pre-interview form to help in research. This entire form is kept in a secure Voces server at the University of Texas, Austin. The final storing of the pre-interview form. Sorry, I have to go to the second page. Will be held at the South Texas Archives at the Jernigan Library at Texas A&M University, Kingsville. We will have stripped out any contact information for yourself or family members, so that will not be a part of your public profile. Your public profile will only be accessible at the Jernigan Library. Do you wish for us to share the rest of your interview in the public file available to researchers at the South Texas Archives at Jernigan Library at the Texas A&M University, Kingsville?
Yes.
On occasion, Voces receives requests from journalists who wish to contact our interview subjects. We only deal with legitimate news outlets. Do you give consent for us to share your phone numbers or your emails with journalists?
Yes.
All right, and we can start the interview. The first question I kind of want to go with, I mean, of course I know because you're my mom, but kind of want to just, what is it that you do for a living and how did it kind of, or how did COVID kind of affect that?
That's a really broad question, Matthew. What do I do for a living? I am a full-time teacher at Bishop High School. I teach health science, so I teach 9th through 12th grade. I also do typically one semester for Coastal Bend College, where I teach the CNA class at Bishop High School. And on the weekends, I am the weekend registered nurse at a local nursing home here in Kingsville. So I'm also a registered nurse.
All right. We can go with the first, so we can go with teaching first. What did COVID, or how did COVID affect your style of teaching? And, you know, we kind of transitioned to online, and how did you go about adjusting to that?
Are you wanting us to go like all the way back to when COVID first started?
Yes.
So what was that, 2020? Yeah, it was leave for spring break and then not go back to school, finish the rest of the school year from home. So it was a really quick, we had our week off for spring break, and then the week we were supposed to go back, they said, oh, we're going to push our start date. We're going to stay home one more week. And so we kind of were just in limbo trying to figure out what was going to happen. And then we got our messages that we were transitioning to completely virtual learning. So it was really hard at first to try and figure out lesson plans and transition to a completely virtual classroom. Fortunately for me, I had already been using Google Classroom, not completely, but at least partially for a few years. So I was pretty familiar with at least that part of it. It was just trying to figure out how to get the materials to the students, how to keep them engaged, what the expectations were, but it was hard transitioning. I mean, you hear it all over the news. Teachers are rock stars, right? Because we did it. We make things happen. So that first end of the school year was the toughest. When we went back to school in the fall, we still were virtual. So by that time, we had picked up a lot more things, figured out how to use Zoom, figured out how to use Screentastic to record our lessons so that the students had complete access to them day or night, to make it more convenient for students whose parents were working and maybe weren't there during the day, to ensure that they were doing what they needed to do. So it was a lot of technology. Like I said, it wasn't as hard for me, the technology part, because I'm pretty technology savvy, I guess. I did encounter a lot of teachers that struggled a lot with just the transition because technology wasn't part of their everyday classroom. It wasn't part of their everyday lives. They didn't use it to the extent that I was familiar with it. But it was hard keeping the children, keeping the students involved, making sure that they were actually doing the work. That was the hardest part. There was a lot of parent contact going on. I struggled especially with my CNA class or Coastal Bend, only because, I mean, as a CNA, it's really hard to have students learn those skills when they're not in the same place with you, when they maybe don't have access to all the supplies that they need. Our school district did give all of our students at least laptops if they needed them. They gave them mobile Wi-Fi spots, the hot spots if they needed them, if they didn't have access to internet at home. So we tried to make things as accessible as possible. But like I said, CNA, sorry, the certified nursing assistant class, it's a hands-on class. So it's really hard in that sense for that class to keep going forward and to be successful. We started the school year, and we typically do our CNA class, our clinical and our lecture all in one semester. So the 2020 to 2021 school year, we weren't able to allow, Coastal Bend didn't allow students to even enroll in the clinical part because no facilities were allowing students in to do any kind of hands-on clinical rotations to get the experience that they would need to work in that profession. So we had to wait till the spring, because we were hopeful that come spring of 2021, we would find facilities that would allow students in, that maybe COVID would have calmed down by then. But as we all know, that didn't happen. And at that point, we didn't even have very many kids in the classroom. They had the option of coming back to school, but the majority of them continued with that virtual education. So that's where we struggled a lot, was trying to get them to practice skills when they don't have a mannequin at home to practice on, to learn skills without actually ever entering a clinical site, so that they could really understand what it's like to work in that field. So that was a challenge. That was a real challenge.
Yeah, for sure. I know I kind of saw that side of it. You know, I was always home with college, and I had the online school, and you were always here teaching your classes and having your little office hours whenever you would do your meetings or whatever. So I kind of got to see both sides, but hearing more about it, like I can see where it would have been tough and struggling just overnight. You know, it's spring, like you said, you went to spring break and you never went back.
Never went back.
Um, so now I kind of want to get a sense, you know, the nursing home, you know, we of course here at the house we kind of heard stories about COVID because I know here in Kingsville it got pretty bad. Um, what is something I guess that opened your eyes working that COVID unit there at the nursing home?
Hmm, that's a tough one. I think if I go back a little bit further, even before we left school, so I mean, I feel like my nursing life doesn't really differ from my teaching life. They, you know, they're all kind of combined, and so everything is kind of, you know, intertwined, so to speak. And I remember we heard about COVID, and I had gotten an email at school from the CDC because I signed up for CDC notifications just to keep up with what's going on. I do from various health sites just because before going into teaching again, I was doing school nursing. So anyway, I got an email and I remember being in class and we were in the email, it said something to the effect that the CDC was warning that, you know, those first cases were coming in and that it was possible that we were going to have a disruption in our life and we were going to have to go transition to virtual learning, transition to all types of virtual work, people just staying at home, a lot of quarantining, a lot of medical procedures having to be put on hold. And at that time, it was kind of surreal. Like you didn't, like you knew it was going on, but you didn't really know that it was going to get down here. I think we live in a bubble here in South Texas, and everything that's happening in the world, like, you know that it's happening, but you don't ever really think it's going to hit home, so to speak. And then it did. See, at the nursing home, I don't think we got a first case for a while. Like there was a few months where we didn't have, it was just kind of quiet because we left for spring break from school. I was still working at the nursing home, obviously. And at that same time, they started closing down the nursing homes. So we closed off the facility to all outside visitors. So it was just the staff that was going in and out. So we thought we were kind of secure, people making good choices, taking care of themselves. We would still screen everybody coming in and out. As soon as that happened, we went to full masks. As soon as the N95s were available, we started with the N95s. And even at the nursing home, we were quarantining, you know, we were keeping residents in their room. We were keeping them away from each other. They ate their meals in the room. We did bed baths. We didn't take them out of their room at all, if possible, just for fear that, you know, if something did get into the facility, that it could get bad. So we transitioned to that. And so I think we all kind of thought we were going to be okay. Probably by May is when they started COVID testing us. The first one was kind of strange, and then it got better. And then maybe I'm thinking by June or July, late June, early July was when COVID did get into our facility. And it was a pretty bad outbreak. It went from 2 or 3 residents turning up positive, and we really didn't have anywhere to send them. So we had a quarantine unit, and then it went from, you know, 2 or 3 rooms to 6 rooms to 10 rooms to a whole hallway. So it exploded really quickly. And it was really hard. I know it was hard for the patients. It was hard for the staff. When it got to its worst, we were so short staffed that we had people that were working, you know, 12, 16-hour shifts every day for weeks on end. I know because it was during the summer and I wasn't working, and I still only work weekends. Even during the summer, I just work weekends at the nursing home. We were so short staffed that I think I worked like 13 days straight just to help them out because we were so short staffed. I mean, everybody was kind of running on fumes. It was like once that first person got sick, it was just like a wildfire. It just spread so quickly, and we weren't at all prepared for it. We really weren't at all prepared for it, and it was hard. Family members would call. They couldn't come in to see their family members. They would stand outside the windows. Or we'd have to call them and say, hey, this is going on, but we can send them to the hospital, but the hospital's not going to take them because even the hospital was overloaded, and it was hard. Yeah. I'm not sure if that answered the whole question.
No, yeah, it did. I still remember, you coming home from work, like you said, you worked like those 13 days, and like the stories you were telling me, Nick and David, or even just seeing like you were working and working and working. I mean, I was 19. I thought I was invincible. I'm a young kid. I'm not gonna get sick, and even if I do, it's not gonna affect me. But hearing the stories and seeing like how hard it was on you and the rest of your coworkers, it kind of put me in perspective. Like, this isn't about me. This is about the ones that aren't, like the ones that are at risk, and the ones that are getting hurt more from this. And that kind of opened my eyes during COVID, like when staying in, not really going out, and getting the vaccine and things like that.
Yeah, that's true, because I know, and I would still tell my students, and I would tell you all, I would tell people, I didn't go anywhere, I didn't do anything, and which is pretty normal for me because I work all the time. But even at that time, it was, if I go somewhere, if I pick up something, then I'm going to take it to these residents who are at much higher risk. So I will probably be fine, but I don't know that I could live with knowing that I brought something in and got somebody sick, and because of me, they lost their life. That was always kind of hanging there in the background.
For sure. That's what it put in perspective whenever you're telling us those stories. How would you say COVID-19 changed our everyday life here at the house for me, Nick, David, you and Dad?
Well, you came for spring break, and then you never went back to school. Nick got furloughed, so was home. So you were doing virtual school. So we were all kind of stuck here. I was the only one that was still working on the weekends, going out on the weekends. But yeah, it changed everything, changed the way we let people in the house. I would get kind of crazy, like keeping hand sanitizer everywhere, making sure that people who came in weren't sick, making sure they were wearing masks. Yeah, I mean, I know I would tell you all, if you're going to the gym to work out, you need to make sure that you're cleaning everything, sanitizing, it was, but it also brought us closer together. We had to spend a lot more time together. It was already springtime, close to summer. Luckily, we had things to do here at the house. I can remember trying new recipes with Nick or with David, and with David trying to do those 1,500 piece puzzles, put them together, keeping us, busy so that we didn't get too bored. But luckily, we have a pretty spacious home, so we weren't right on top of each other. I imagine that for people who live in smaller homes who maybe have to share rooms with each other, it might have been more difficult to be around some people, the same people 24/7. But I think it brought us closer together. Luckily, we didn't struggle as much as most, I think, financially, or we weren't struggling for food. We made it through okay, I think.
Yeah. I think my favorite part, I mean, of course we were stuck, but I still remember it was like every Saturday or Sunday. It's Saturday or Sunday. We would all sit outside at the table, and then we'd make the street tacos, and just all eat out there and drink. That I think that was probably my favorite part of the
That was,
quarantine, being
yeah,
locked down.
I think that was Sundays, yes, sitting outside and having family dinner and visiting. Yeah.
Okay. What I know we've had a lot of conversations about this one, with like in the kitchen and things like that. What was your first reaction like on the vaccine? As a nurse, like were you kind of questioning like, man, like that was really fast, like should I not take it, or was it more of like we're 2021 already, we already have more technology, like that's the right thing to do, like they got the vaccine, let's get it out and try to get people safe. Like what was your take when you first heard about the vaccine?
When I first heard about the vaccine, my initial, it was questioning. It was, did they have enough time to really research this? Like, what are some of the side effects? What's going to happen? And I remember talking to other nurses about it. I remember talking to other teachers about it and kind of contemplating it. And it just seemed kind of like it was far off. So when it first came out, we were questioning, and of course social media plays an influence. There's always a role with social media there, and so it was hearing things about it that made you question more. At one point they said, okay, you work in a healthcare facility, and we're in a small community here in Kingsville, and I think the first vaccines came to the hospital, and those were the first healthcare workers, or they got the first doses that were available to us in this area. And they had already told us, the hospital personnel were going to get the first doses, and then it was going to go to the nursing home staff and then residents. And by the time they told us, hey, it's coming up, it's in 2 weeks, this is the day we're going to get it, this is the vaccine you're going to get. It was a struggle. Do I get it? Do I not get it? And I think when they finally said, it's going to be here, that I really started researching and looking at the science behind, and really not focusing on social media, trying to go through trustworthy sources to get the information that I wanted. It still seemed risky, but it came down to, do I want to get the vaccine, or do I want to wait and risk it? And my thought process was, if somebody's going to get the vaccine, I would rather it be me than like one of you guys, than somebody else in my family and something bad happen. Like if something's going to happen, I would rather it be me first. So I think once I thought about it that way, there wasn't even a question of whether I would do it or not. Your dad was hesitant, didn't want me to get it. There was a lot of coworkers who were hesitant, who still haven't gotten it to this day, and I don't understand that. But got it early December, and I think I was pretty lucky that I was one of the first ones that got it here in this area. Because shortly after that, your dad came out positive. I didn't get it. We don't know why, but you have to wonder, is it because I had at least partial immunity from getting the vaccine like a week and a half or 2 weeks before he came out sick?
Yeah, I wish I got the vaccine around December whenever you did, because I remember getting it around April, and then right after that I had tested positive with COVID. I mean, it helped a lot. The vaccine made it seem like it was just a slight cold. I was kind of on vacation for 2 weeks in the game room. This question, I know this one we've had a lot of conversations about. How do you believe politics affected the way that COVID-19 was handled? And what is your take on what could have been done differently? Where we could have been in the months after we had first gotten it, if it was in if different steps were taking, and things like that. Like what would be your take on that?
Yeah, yes, we've had a lot of talks about this, and you know how I feel about this, and I definitely feel that politics did influence the path that this COVID pandemic took. I think that things could have turned out differently if, starting from the top, if they had been more on top of it, if they had taken it seriously, and because the top people in our country, the political powers that were in control at that time, because they did not really relay the seriousness of the situation to the American people, kind of made them question it. And, you know, you still see it today. There's a lot of them who still think it was a hoax, that it wasn't real. If that hadn't gone on, we might have had a lot of people getting a vaccine a lot sooner. We might have had a lot of people testing a lot sooner. It was early in the pandemic when they were like, oh, well, we closed off all these flights, but they didn't. They closed off flights from China, but they were still letting Americans in that had been in China. We had some as close to San Antonio as early as February, some that turned out positive. Yeah. Politics played a major role in what happened. The president and all of his advisors and the people who worked for him, the so-called task force that they set up, we've seen documentaries on it now, they weren't doing what they needed to do. You know, the WHO, they had tests for us back in early January, at least. And our government said, no, we don't want those tests. We're going to make our own tests. And then they made a bunch of tests, and then they figured out that those tests were made wrong and weren't going to give us results the way that we needed them. And then, you know, we wasted a lot of time. And it took, you know, it was just that time where it spread like a wildfire. And I don't think that they were prepared. I don't think that I'm hoping it's that they didn't understand the seriousness of it. They couldn't foresee how it was going to go. Even though they should have been more precautious with the whole situation, because we had too many healthcare workers that weren't given, you know, the supplies that they needed to take care of the patients. We had too many people who just didn't understand how bad it could be, and then ultimately lost their lives because of that. We could have stopped it, or at least slowed it down a lot sooner, if the people at the top had really taken the time and really focused on it, if they had followed the advice, instead of talking about drinking bleach to kill it, you know, stupid things like that. Yeah, politics, it made this way worse than it could be, you know, and it turned everybody into you know, I have my rights, and you're right, you do have a right, everybody has their rights. But when the vaccine became available, it was a big debate on how can you force me to get a vaccine, when in fact, we've been making you get vaccines for decades. I had to get vaccines to go to school, and I'm already 47. So how long ago was that? You, as my child, you had to get a whole bunch of vaccines. Most of my kids that are in high school now, you know, and I ask them, how many vaccines do you think you've gotten? And they're like, well, I don't know. And then we'll look it up, and it's like, you've had over, you know, 20 something different vaccines that are, you know, several doses of the same vaccine, but you know what I mean? A lot of vaccines in your life, and you never thought once, you never questioned it. Your parents never questioned it. You did it for the greater good. And that's what our political people should have been doing. They should have been promoting that. They should have been promoting people be more cautious about things, you know, so that it didn't get to the level that it got. And I think a lot of people still, because of politics, because of social media, still don't believe that it was as bad as it was. And that's because down here, it didn't get nearly as bad as it did in the big cities. But if you were working in a hospital down here, or you're working in a nursing home, and you were watching the people suffer alone because family members couldn't come in to be with them, if you were watching them lose their lives all alone, again, because family members couldn't come be with them, because healthcare workers were, you know, so overworked and just couldn't sit with you during your last moments. Unless you're experiencing it, I don't think you really can get the full picture of how bad it was.
No, yeah. I mean, I never will be able to fully understand like the severity of it, since I had never been to like the hospitals, or I never worked in them. But yeah, I do agree. And like how you're saying with like starting at the top with politics, I still remember seeing that the president at the time was saying he was trying to sugarcoat it because he didn't want to scare anybody, and that just didn't make sense with like if it's something that's like deadly or lethal, like you should be serious about it, because I mean everybody's life matters. Like it's not something you
Mhm.
should play around with. Um, and that kind of questioned everything once it started with that. Like does he care about the United States? Like he just empowered for money or things like that? But that's beyond the point. Um, my next question, I kind of had this conversation with some of my college classmates. Um, I kind of want to get an aspect or like a view from the teacher side. Like we were in school, we got let out for COVID, and then we went straight to online. And for a minute there, a lot of the work we did wasn't like proctored or viewed. It was kind of just, if you get it done, you get it done. If you're cheating, whatever,
Mhm.
just turn in everything. Do you think going from that to straight back into to in person, it kind of made some students like lazy getting used to that cheating part, or like kind of change the way that they go about doing their schoolwork opposed to before the pandemic had happened?
Oh, definitely, definitely. I can see it from both the teacher's side and from the student side. Because that first year, that end of the school year 2020, we jumped into virtual learning, and it was, you know, I had different classes. I had CNA classes, I had health science classes, I had medical terminology classes, um, all of different levels. And it was, we're just going to give everybody who's in your classes the same work. And so we, at that time, it was easy because we're health related, to do lessons like on hand washing and the importance of hand washing and how to do it correctly. But it was definitely watered down work. We just needed them to be doing something. Then we just wanted to finish the school year so we could regroup and then be ready for the fall. So fall came, and yes, it was virtual learning. Most of the kids were doing it from home. And I know at our school in particular, the kids who started struggling, who within, after that first grading period, the first 9 weeks were struggling, weren't doing their work. Those were the kids that we started saying, you have to come in person because you're not doing any of the work. But we just gave them opportunity after opportunity, extension, watered down work. We weren't monitoring. There was no way for us to monitor or proctor quizzes or tests. So I know I've never, before COVID, I was not big like on open book tests and stuff. It was, even though I don't teach a core class, I think that the information in the classes that I teach are important, especially for students who are wanting to go into healthcare. So, my work, my classes, I guess you would consider hard for some people, because I did have expectations. I did expect you to study and to take a test, and it was an open book, and you were going to be quizzed, and you needed to know a lot of information. And from home, it was impossible to do that. So, during that year, 2020 to 2021, that whole school year, I didn't have any other choice but to have all open book tests because I couldn't proctor them. So yeah, if kids say they weren't cheating, I don't believe that. I honestly believe that they were going to do the least amount that they could do to get by. So come this school year, when we're all face to face, and yeah, the kids weren't prepared for it. I see it more with the younger kids, like our incoming freshmen or our sophomores. The freshmen and sophomores, this is their first year in high school. So even though the sophomores, they're technically their second year, it's their actual first year at the school, being there. So it was hard for them to transition, but they're not as focused, they're not as motivated, they are definitely behind their peers when it comes to where they should be by this time. My sophomores, things that they should have learned freshman year, we didn't get to cover everything. There just wasn't the time with the Zoom. What they should have learned, they maybe didn't learn because they were doing open book tests and probably copying from each other. And so, yeah, we do see kids are struggling right now. Our younger ones, some of them, they don't even care. They don't do any of the work because there was no there was nobody there at home watching over them to make sure that they did their work. And they could wait till the last day of the grading period and turn everything in. And then we were expected to get everything graded and give them credit and accept everything. And so I think they got into that habit. We still have a lot that will wait till the last day and they're like, well, I'm failing, but I have, 18 papers right here that we're missing. I need you to grade them and give me credit for them. They have that expectation still because things were so relaxed. So yeah, I can definitely see it's a different ball game right now in education. So many teachers are struggling because we've just never had the issues that we have with students as far as completing work, as far as not cheating, as far as being on grade level, as far as behavior, because, for almost 2 years, they were at home basically doing anything they wanted and not really having to answer to anyone. So it's a struggle for them, and it's definitely a struggle for the teachers as well.
Oh yeah, so yeah, I can see that. Like even in college, like I went to college before. Sometimes I'm still trying to get back into that in person, being there and taking all the information in. Because I got kind of used to just turning on my laptop. I know they're not going to proctor me. Turn on my laptop for lecture, hopping on my PlayStation 5, and kind of just there, but not
But not
there.
there.
Uh-huh.
Definitely, yeah. My seniors right now, my CNA students, when I'm like, hey, you've got it, you have to do it or you fail, you won't graduate. Only now are they starting to take it seriously. My younger ones don't. And as a teacher, I can say, and it's probably not a good thing to say, but I think I've lowered my expectations this year because I understand this transition back to face-to-face learning is just as hard for the students as it is for us. And so I have lowered my expectations this year. I'm nowhere near as strict about the tests and everything. I find myself doing more open book tests just because it's going to be too much of a struggle to have a whole class failing because they don't have the study skills that they need to be successful in the classroom right now. And I shouldn't have to do that, but they haven't transitioned fully back into this face-to-face learning, like you said.
Yeah, it was kind of a shock whenever it was all just straight to online. Because I even remember I was in my English class there at UTSA. The last time I ever saw my English professor, that was my last class, and I got out of class, went to work, came straight home for spring break. Um, the last time I saw her, it was like she was like, "Oh, it's just a little cold that's going around. I'll see y'all on Monday." And straight to online. She didn't even kind of get to do that online. She kind of just, you're like, hey, y'all's papers due this day. Go ahead and finish it. And like, that was the very last time I saw her, and it just completely culture shock. Like, I didn't know how to do online classes. I didn't know how to do anything like that. Like, it just never, like, it was just all new to me.
It was a struggle for everyone, and then I think down here people didn't really consider that. I mean, we have computers at home, and so computers weren't a shock to us, but it was shocking to really see how many kids don't have a computer at home. They have zero access to a computer, not even a tablet or anything like that. They don't have anything but their cell phone, possibly. It was a shock to see how many people didn't even have internet service at home. So how are we expecting them to be successful if they don't even have those basic necessities to do any type of work? And then when we do give them a computer, if they're not very good at working on a computer, and then they have parents who don't know how to work on a computer, it's basically setting them up for failure. So yeah, it was hard for you all. It was hard for everybody.
Speaking of like transitioning back, I know we're 2 years into this pandemic. There's still cases, there's still deaths around the world from the pandemic. At your, like in your class or at, Bishop High School, is there still like social distancing in the classrooms, like with the dividers? Like, do you still see kids wearing masks, or is it just they're kind of just playing it like it never happened?
When the school year started, we had most of the kids. I was surprised. I was really worried about going back into the classroom and having a full class of kids. My classroom now is pretty small. And like I said, I still worry about picking up something, especially being around a whole bunch of students, picking up something and then taking it to the nursing home. That has always been a worry for me. But we did start the school year with screens, and I still have screens in my classroom, and I still require kids in my classroom to use the screens. As far as masks, we don't see as many now. We don't see as many kids wearing masks, but I still do see a lot of kids wearing masks. It's maybe like a 50-50. Unless you're out maybe at an outdoor sporting event, then we see more kids without them. But it just kind of goes back and forth. And like I said, I teach the healthcare classes. Part of what we do is go into a nursing home or go into the hospital for clinicals. And part of that was a requirement of having the COVID vaccine. And I was really surprised at the beginning of this year that at least 95% of my students were already vaccinated. So that's a good thing. We didn't see a huge jump in numbers at the high school or at the school district until maybe last December, when it got pretty bad. But other than that, and that was only, I mean, we have in our district about 1,500, between 1,500 and 1,700 students. And that number jumped up to like 150, I think, 180 across the district. So it wasn't that crazy. So a lot of people were taking precautions, and a lot of people still are. But it also, I feel like there's political lines there. Like the kids know which teachers don't want to wear masks, who don't believe that this virus is something to worry about, who are not vaccinated. And then they know the ones who definitely preach it. Because, you know, I am a big preacher of wearing masks. I think that masks work. I think that hand washing works. I find myself living proof of that because I followed all those mandates and did everything right in the nursing home and didn't contract COVID, even when it got to its worst. So yeah, we still, in my classroom, we do, but not in every classroom. So there are a lot of kids who, I don't think it's that they don't believe that it's serious. It's just that they feel like the threat is kind of over. We're not seeing as many cases of it. I do joke, I guess it's kind of a joke. Anytime they cough, I send them to the nurse's office because I'm like, you're not going to bring in the Omicron subvariant BA2 into my classroom. So please go get yourself checked. Or as soon as they start sneezing, it's make sure you have on a mask. Like if you have any signs or symptoms, you're going to mask up and you're going to go to the nurse to go get checked. So we try to keep it safe, at least in our rooms.
For sure. Yeah. I still think that's crazy how me and dad both got COVID and nobody else did. And we're, like you said, kind of close.
I mean, we still think that Nick got it, maybe one of the first here in this area to get it because it was spring break 2020. Everybody is home for spring break. And don't you remember Nick got sick and he stayed in his room all week long and would sleep like 18 hours a day. And he would say, like, I woke up in the middle of the night in a cold sweat and I had to get in the shower, you know, and he felt sick. And I remember saying, you haven't been eating, Nick, like, are you okay? And he was like, I can't taste anything. That's why I haven't eaten. And he went to the doctor. And at that time, COVID tests weren't available here because this again was March 2020. Nobody was testing in this area. So I don't even know what they diagnosed him with, some type of infection, like a upper respiratory infection, gave him some antibiotics and sent him home. But he stayed in his room that whole week. And here we are, 2 years later, and he still can't smell and his taste is very weak. So I really think Nick even had it way back then, even though it was never confirmed because there was no one to test. But he had all the signs and symptoms, things that we didn't realize until later on when they started saying, well, you know, the loss of taste and smell is one of the main symptoms. But in March, they weren't really talking about that. They were just talking about all the deaths. So yeah, I think even though Nick didn't ever get diagnosed, I think Nick had it too. So he would have been the first one in our family to have that March 2020. Then your dad, January 2021, and you in April of 2021, right?
Yeah, it was a timeline. That's because we had that concert in San Antonio. And then when we got back, that's whenever Nick started started feeling sick.
We
Because
went
San
to the
Antonio
concert
had those people that were positive and they had gotten out, and everything went crazy from there.
and we went to the rodeo in San Antonio, and yeah. But also Nick has at that time clients that would fly in to go hunt there at the ranch were flying in from all over. So who knows what they brought with them.
True. And we can use this one as the last question. Is there anything else that you would like to share with me about your experience with COVID-19 that I haven't asked about?
I feel like it'd be better if you asked me a question. I'm trying to think, what haven't we talked about? I guess the only thing I didn't talk about were things that I saw in the nursing home that I always brought up to my students and tried to bring up with my coworkers and to just let them know, because at the time when it was really bad, we had all of these stories of what we're looking for. We're looking for a fever, for a cough, for a loss of taste or smell. And those are the things that we were looking for. And I remember in the nursing home, I do wound care. So it's dealing with skin infections or any type of wounds. That's what I focus on. And I remember kind of paying attention to what was happening, in that I would have patients that would show up with a rash, unknown origin. We didn't know what was causing it. And we'd start treating it and it really wouldn't respond. But maybe a week or two after this rash showed up, then they would start with signs or symptoms. And it would be COVID. And at the time, I remember looking for articles to see if it was research into this. And there was a few, there wasn't much, but it always turned out when I would see this certain type of rash, the patient would usually end up COVID positive. Because I remember telling my DON, hey, you know what, I've seen this rash before. I think we should test them. And they're like, well, if they don't have a fever and they don't have a cough and they're not complaining of the loss of taste or smell, then, those are the things, those are the classic, that's what we're looking for. And not really thinking that viruses typically end up as a rash. Chickenpox is a virus and you have a rash. Measles is a virus and you have a rash. And so we should have been looking at that. And so I remember always telling my coworkers and trying to educate people outside of healthcare. So my coworkers at school, their family members, when they would start talking about it, it's don't just pay attention to those initial signs or symptoms. If you're just waiting for a fever or a cough or a sore throat, and then losing your sense of taste or smell, you need to look for other things too. Like that's not the only way that it shows up. And so that to me was a big deal, because if maybe we had people looking for other things other than your classic signs or symptoms, maybe we could have stopped the spread in some way, shape, or form as well. I think that was an important thing. I always it surprised me to see something like that. Like I could see the things that were going on and almost like you predict it, and it happened. Not a whole bunch, but it happened. And we should have had more education for our public on things like that to help everybody.
I even know you were, I think it was right before I had tested positive. I had diarrhea, and I was like, man, I've been sick to my stomach the last couple of days. And you're like, yeah, you need to go get tested. And sure enough, that's whenever I tested positive. I didn't even know that was something that could have been related to. I always just thought it was the cough, the sore throat,
you were thinking of those classic things. And then I think I told you, yes, I had patients that all they had was an upset stomach, like if it was a stomach virus. So the nausea, the diarrhea, maybe the vomiting, that's all they had. They never got a fever. They never got anything else, never lost their sense of taste or smell. They never got anything else. So yeah, it was I don't think we were as vocal about those less common symptoms. Now, if you actually went and Googled it, you would probably see some stuff there, but it wasn't as vocal. And then in the nursing home, it was kind of hard because some of these residents, obviously they're older. Some of them have trouble communicating. And I remember one who hadn't been sick at all, but was complaining that the food tasted like crap. Like she just was saying, it tastes ugly. There's no taste. It just doesn't taste good. Like I don't want to eat that. Bring me something else, and kept complaining. And I remember saying, we should probably test her, because maybe she doesn't know how to tell us. Like she doesn't understand that she's lost her sense of taste. And that's why everything tastes ugly to her, because she can't taste it. You know what I mean? So, how many other situations were there like that in other facilities, at hospitals, across the world? How many other people were like that? And we just didn't know because they weren't able to tell you. They didn't understand that that's why it was happening, because of their age, because of their condition, stuff like that. Yeah, we needed to be paying more attention. But I think everybody was just struggling and trying to stay afloat, really. Trying to stay on top of it, because it got really, really bad. And it was sad for a lot of people, the ones especially who lost family members, who lost loved ones, and that they couldn't be with them. From a healthcare standpoint, I know we hit hard times. We were struggling, family members were struggling, residents were struggling. Residents getting depressed because they couldn't leave their room because they couldn't see their family members, didn't understand why their families couldn't come and visit them. Even if you explain it to them with a dementia patient, they're not going to remember, they're not going to understand. So you're going to have to keep explaining, they're still going to be confused about it. But I know it was hard because then we would have family members that would complain, well, you're doing this wrong, or you're doing that wrong, or why aren't you doing this? And not really understanding that, hey, I'm one nurse on this one hall, and I have 32 patients, and I only have 2 CNAs, and I'm overwhelmed, and I'm doing the best that I can. And I remember thinking at some point we had, family members who complained, and I understand they're worried about their loved ones. There's no, you can't get over that. It's hard, if you can't be there. But then when we did say, hey, you can come in, you can come see them, you can come be with them. They're COVID positive, but you can come be with them. We'll give you all the PPE that you need so that you can go and spend time with them. And they refused. So that got to me like, you're going to complain about the care that we're giving when we're here taking care of your loved one, possibly risking ourselves, possibly risking taking something home to our own families. And when we give you the opportunity to come in and wear the same PPE that we wear, protect yourselves the same way, you refuse. That's your family member. That was a real struggle watching that happen, being on that side of it.
Yeah, I can, like I'm saying, like even some of the stuff that like the news, like stories, like it's news to me, like seeing that. But yeah, no, that's a tough scene. I guess the only kind of
you're not willing to
picture that,
risk yourself, but you're willing for us to risk ourselves. And then you're going to complain that, you don't think we're doing a good enough job. That's hard for a healthcare worker, because some of these people worked, way, way harder than I did. I was only there most of the time on the weekends. The ones who were there full time, are the ones that were really risking themselves and risking their families, and did it every day without question, without even a second thought.
Definitely. Well, Mom, I just want to say you are a rock star. Teachers are rock stars. Nurses are rock stars.
Yeah.
I'm proud to say that you're my mom, and I think this was a good interview, and thank you for the conversation. I learned some more things about kind of like the teaching aspect. I like that's where I'm gonna go with my future once I get my degree, and kind of hearing that side of it, like how things change, and how you were just persistent. You went with it, you went with the role, you rolled with it, and you got it done. I mean, I saw it here every day. You were on the computer, if it was like the school meetings or the teachings, or like you were getting it done, doing honestly more than some of my college professors back in UTSA. But that's that's beyond the point.
That was funny.
But yeah, like it was a nice conversation, kind of getting to know that side of the teaching and of the nursing program, and kind of seeing the stuff that I didn't get to see and what I didn't know of when
Mhm.
it came to COVID-19. I kind of saw it as just being on lockdown. Like I wasn't able to do anything. I never got to see the full seriousness of it in that that like hospital or like the nursing home aspect. I mean, the most I saw was like Grey's Anatomy, and that's it. That's kind of
Mhm.
my top. But it was a real thing, and it really happened. And I think we're living in a historical point to where people years from now are gonna look back and be like wow, like that what was happening. And I think even this interview,
Mhm.
people are gonna look at this and see this and be like wow, like that was something that really happened. Like people actually
Mhm.
went through this.
Lived through it, and like they say, I mean, some people will look at it like, I don't know how you did it, but it's one of those, you don't have a choice. When you don't have a choice but to do it, you get through it, you figure out a way. And I think healthcare workers do that every day, and I think teachers do that every day. Yeah, that's the beauty of it, is that when there's no choice, you get it done, and that's what we did. We got it done.
Mm-hmm. Facts. Well, thank you again. Um, this is where I stopped the recording.
Okay,
Love you, Mom.
love you.